I'm Jason Robinson. I'm VP of Product at GEVO. What I'd like to tell you about today is how we are creating paths to financial identity for the next billion consumers of financial services. So maybe a little bit different than some of the other presentations you're hearing today. Our markets are primarily global and international, people who don't have any kind of credit history or credit scores. So a little bit about GEVO. So we are a 4.5-year-old startup here in San Francisco, or headquartered here in San Francisco. And currently we are at scale. We're serving 28 countries around the world, and pretty diverse and global team. We are on 5 continents, as it says here. I've lost track of the number of languages that are actually spoken at GEVO. I think we lost track around 20. So highly global, highly diverse team. And our model is we are a B2B2C company. We partner with mobile carriers around the world and leverage their data to help people actually start building credit history and get access to financial services. And so in a nutshell, what I like to say around the office, I see Anthony there, he's actually on my team. He's heard me say that what we're doing is we're actually building or creating an equitable and sustainable model for economic growth for individuals and businesses, starting with their everyday payments for mobile service. And I'll get into exactly how we do that in a second. But the idea is that if we are successful, then everyone wins. The consumers, the mobile carriers, the banks, and obviously GEVO kind of prospers in the end. Okay, so why do we start with mobile service? Actually, there was some good precursors to this in both Tom and Gary's presentation. So virtually everyone in the world actually has a mobile phone. The GSMA estimates that there are 5 billion unique mobile customers in the world. And so what that means is that if you are in a rural or a cash-based community, you probably actually have a financial relationship with at least one company, and that's your mobile carrier. And those payments are actually on record in some database somewhere. So that obviously provides a very interesting platform for distribution of something like a financial inclusion product. And the second reason is what you're seeing here is that it's actually a pretty bad time to be a mobile carrier in the world because of market saturation and also lack of differentiation between different mobile carriers. They're actually only competing on price, which is dramatically dropping revenues for them, and that trend continues into the future. So it's actually very clear within the mobile carrier community that they need to reinvent themselves, and actually financial services is a relatively common answer that mobile carriers give in terms of what they'd like to be in the next 10 years, and distributor of financial services to their customers. And so GEVO focuses on people who have prepaid mobile plans. Now, just to set a little bit of context here, what does it mean to have a prepaid mobile plan? So if you have one of these things, you are probably going to your corner store at least once per week and actually adding cash into your account. So you have a mobile account that kind of holds money for you, not FDIC insured, of course. And so you use that balance throughout the week to make calls, browse the internet, do what you need to do. And probably at least once per week, you actually run out of balance and your phone is effectively off. You can't make calls, you can't use the internet, it's over for you until you can physically go back to that corner store and add balance to your account. And so that's a typical experience. And what's interesting about this is about 78% of the world is actually on a prepaid plan. And that experience is dramatically different than our AT&T and Verizon plans here in the United States. I make calls, I use data, and they bill me at the end of the month. I can only have that plan because I have credit. If I didn't have credit, Verizon would not give me that plan. And so it's really not a large logical leap to believe that there is a high correlation between people who have prepaid mobile plans and people who are financially excluded in the world. Right? At least that's our bet here at GEVO. Okay, what are we doing, actually? So we have 3 products. We call them GEVO Up, GEVO IQ, and GEVO Plus, and they work together to get people on the path to building what we call a financial identity. And I'll get into more details in a second, but at a very high level, GEVO Up does is it's actually our acquisition engine, so it helps us acquire users. But it actually is the thing that helps people start building credit history in our system. GEVO IQ actually enables our financial partners to leverage the credit information that we're building with our users, and as we like to say, help them say yes to a qualified but what was previously invisible customer base. And then GEVO Plus actually just facilitates those connections between financial service providers and end users. Okay, so starting with GEVO Up, and I think the best way to do this is to talk about me for a little bit, about how I actually built a credit history here in the United States. And it's a pretty typical experience. So in college, I got my first credit card, a student credit card. I think the limit was like $500, and probably my parents co-signed on that. So I leveraged their credit to get my first credit line, and I had some student loans, right? And so I started building my credit history by just using that credit card, paying back on time, and making my monthly payments on loans. So pretty standard stuff, right? So fast forward to today, you know, there's banks that would eagerly and probably gladly give me a loan for high-ticket items because I'm a very low credit risk, so for a car or a mortgage or whatever it may be. Now, if you look around the world, and maybe here in the United States as well, that starting point is actually a key piece that's missing in what we like to call the credit infrastructure, that there's really no student credit card for someone to get started with, right? And so that's where GEVO Up comes in. So what happens, I told you about prepaid mobile plans. So when people go into that low or zero balance state, their phones are effectively off, what we actually do in partnership with the mobile carrier is we offer a small loan of 1 day of mobile service. And they take that loan, they pay it back on time, and now that was their starting point. And we actually, over time, over 3 to 6 months, work them up to actually a loan for a whole month's worth of mobile service. And so during that time, you have a credit history. It's just in mobile service, but you start to have a credit history. And so from there is where GEVO IQ comes in. And so back to me for a second. So I have some Chase credit cards in my pocket, but let's say I wanted to get a mortgage with Wells Fargo, right? So how does this work? I could probably do that. What's happening in this case is that Chase is actually sharing my credit history, my credit information with the credit bureau, and Wells Fargo can pull that at time when I make an application for a loan. And it's really, this portability is another key aspect of credit infrastructure that we see that's really missing elsewhere in the world. What we find is that a typical developing country, a credit bureau actually covers only 10 to 30% of the entire country, right? So lack of portability is another thing that's missing, and that's where GEVO IQ comes in. So we have people building credit history within our system through GEVO Up, and there's also some payment data that we're getting from our partners, especially the mobile carrier. So what we do is actually take that data, structure it in terms of a financial identity, and there's that word again, that credit risk departments at fintechs and banks or whoever it might be, capital providers, can actually leverage that and actually have credit information to say yes to people when they do walk in to ask for a loan or whatever it may be. So adding portability to the system. So that's what GEVO IQ does. And finally, GEVO Plus. So, you know, what's nice if you have a really good credit score here in the United States is that potentially capital providers will compete to fund you your loan. So if I have a super high score, I might actually shop around at SoFi, at Wells Fargo, at whoever it may be for my mortgage. And theoretically, that competition will drive the price down. Of course, the price is in the form of interest and fees. So that's really nice for me. But if you actually look around the world, when we talk about, and actually this was an earlier point, to be financially excluded may not mean that you don't have any access at all. It usually means you have access to one or two things, and it's very high interest, very high fees, and you just have to swallow it, and that actually perpetuates the expression that it's very expensive to be poor, right? Because you don't have that kind of competitive advantage as a consumer. So this is where GEVO Plus comes in. The idea behind this product is that it makes it easy for financial institutions to create new products, set up new products, and actually experiment with them for a population that they may have no experience with in the past. So facilitating that onboarding process to actually bring more capital providers to this end of the market. And on the other side, on the consumer side, GEVO Plus is the UX UI, the experience that helps people navigate between their now hopefully copious new options and actually choose financial services, financial products that actually address their financial needs. And we're able to do this because through Juvo Up, through Juvo IQ, we've actually built a relationship with consumers, and we kind of know their behavior and what their needs are at this point. So I wanted to close with a couple of specific services that we're working on. So one is around payment convenience. And I actually just got back from Tokyo with one of our partners here where we presented on this. One thing, it's really hard, if you don't have a debit or a credit card, it's really hard to buy things online, especially, let's say you have an Android phone. It's hard to buy apps, it's hard to buy content, it's just hard to make payments. And so there's actually a lot of companies that have sprouted up called carrier billing companies that are addressing this problem. And they enable people to actually buy digital content with their balance in their mobile account, right? So it's a great step forward. The problem is what you see here on the left, that 70 to 80% of these transactions actually fail at time of purchase because there's no balance in that account at that time. So 70 to 80%, that's a significant amount of these purchases, and this is really where Juvo comes in. So we've been partnering with these carrier billing companies around the world and providing credit at time of purchase while managing the bad debt and mitigating fraud risk to enable a lot of these purchases to go through. And then what happens after you make this purchase on credit with Juvo, you actually just pay back by going back to your corner store and putting cash back into your account. And that's how we process the repayment. So hopefully making payments for digital services and digital purchases a lot easier for people out there in the world. And then finally, another particular service that we're working on is, I like to think of it as digital inclusion, but helping people finance smartphone devices. And again, when people don't have credit, official credit. So actually in 2017, this is an interesting stat, global shipments of smartphones actually decreased, right? Smartphone penetrations hit about 40 to 50% worldwide, but shipments decreased last year. And the GSMA did a survey, and 64% said the cost of a smartphone was the primary barrier for them to move from a non-smartphone to a smartphone. So actually, Juvo is partnered with Samsung and PayJoy on this front, and what we're doing is for people who are building credit in our system, or sometimes just leveraging data within the mobile carrier itself, we're actually providing kind of customized finance plans for smartphones. And what I'm really excited about this program is that it's not just we're giving people smartphones, moving them from non-smartphones to smartphones. It's actually we're getting them mid to top tier smartphones. So this is why I like to call this a digital inclusion initiative, because it's not just about having a smartphone, it's about something that actually provides ease and convenience to your life, right? So that's actually it. There's a ton more I wanted to tell you about, but I know I'm hitting my limit. I really want to thank the Rex and his group for inviting me to speak today. It's really fun for me because usually we're a B2B2C company, so I usually do B2B pitches all the time. So it's fun to actually talk about financial inclusion to a group of people who actually care. So thank you again, and I think we have time for questions.